So good morning. Thanks you for joining us for the third session in our four-part autumn series on financial services regulatory topics. So I'll just quickly run over some housekeeping. Please keep your cameras off and your microphones muted. As ever, these sessions are designed to be short and snappy, so we won't be taking questions at the end, but do feel free to get in touch with either myself, Marianne, who's our other speaker today, or any of our financial services regulatory team afterwards if you have any follow-up questions. This session will be recorded and it will be distributed to you afterwards. So let's just get going with today's session on financial promotions. So you may well have tuned in for one of our horizon scanning or other sessions where we've spoken about financial promotions before. It is an ongoing area of concern for the FCA and following a consultation published earlier in the year. The FCA has now published its final policy statement and handbook rules for strengthening financial promotion rules for high-risk investments and firms approving financial promotions. And Marianne will be taking a closer look at the new rules in more detail to bring us right up to speed a little bit later on. I am conscious that there will be differing levels of experience with financial promotions for those of you on the call with us today. Some of you will be very familiar, others maybe less so. So before we do look at what is changing a bit later on, let's set the scene of the existing regime. So if we go on to the next slide, please. We have there some examples of financial promotions across different sectors. And we've all seen these types of promotions. Like any form of advertising, they are designed to grab your attention, pique your interest. And so the FCA regulates this type of advertising with the aim of protecting consumers from harm as a result of any promotions which do not meet the requirement of being clear, fair, and not misleading. So on the slide there, we can see promotions for car finance, insurance, ISA products, and a new addition to the FCA's regulatory perimeter are certain funeral plans. That's an area that's kept me quite busy recently, as funeral plans just came into the scope of regulation in the summer there. So whilst the legislative framework, which I'll come on to a bit later on, so while that is the same for regulating financial promotions in each regulated sector, each sector will be subject to its own conduct of business sourcebook within the FCA handbook. So the rules on promoting funeral plans are within the relevant sourcebook. The rules for insurance are found within ICOBs, and the rules regulating the financial promotion of banking products are found under BCOBs. So that's just a snippet there from the FCA handbook and the relevant sourcebooks. But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. How do we actually determine that a communication falls within the scope of the financial promotions regime in the first place? So our starting point for this is section 21 of the Financial Services and Markets Act, which sets out the restrictions on financial promotion. And section 21 says that a person must not, in the course of business, communicate an invitation or inducement to engage in investment activity or to engage in claims management activity, unless that person is an authorised person. And by authorised, we mean authorised by a regulator, either the FCA or the PRA. Alternatively, where they're not an authorised person, a firm can get the content of the intended financial promotion approved by a person that is authorised by the FCA or PRA. Alternatively, where the firm is not authorised or has approval from an authorised person, the firm may be able to show that the financial promotion falls under one of the categories of exemption. So I don't propose to go into all of the exemptions, but these are set out in the Financial Services and Markets Act 2000, Financial Promotion Order 2005, known as the FPO. So when understanding and applying the exemptions, there is very specific terminology around how the communication is formed. The FPA draws a distinction between whether a communication is made or directed, and whether the communication occurs in real time or non-real time, whether it's solicited or unsolicited. All of these factors are relevant when considering if an exemption can apply. So some examples of exemptions include the mere conduit exemption, which is Article 18 of the FPO. This provides an exemption where a person is merely distributing the communication which cannot properly be considered to be an invitation or inducement, although this may be subject to change in the future, as Marianne is going to touch on a little bit later on. There's also an exemption for follow-up communications under Article 14. So where certain conditions are met, a financial promotion may constitute follow-up communication and therefore be out with scope. There's also generic promotions under Article 17. So this can apply where the communication does not identify directly or indirectly the provider of a controlled investment to which the communication relates, and does not identify directly or indirectly any persons carrying on a controlled activity in relation to that investment. We also have Article 19, which provides an exemption for investment professionals. So where the recipients of the communication are considered sufficiently expert to understand the risks involved with investments and do not therefore need any additional statutory protection. And this is often a widely used exemption as it covers all types of communication, whether real-time or non-real-time, listed or unsolicited, in relation to all types of controlled activities. And this is one that we see quite a lot with our clients. Another one to mention, which will potentially be familiar to you, are probably likely familiar, are financial promotions in the workplace. These are found under Article 72 to 72F. And so there are certain requirements to be met, but these exemptions provide the means for employers to be able to promote certain employment-related products to staff without falling within the scope of the regime. So these types of products would include pension products, insurance products, some credit agreements. So in terms of deciding whether a communication would be considered a financial promotion and not subject to an exemption, a firm can consult Paragraph 8 of the FCA handbook. And Paragraph 8 sets out detailed guidance and even practical examples of what constitutes a financial promotion. Just some other key points to note. So the financial promotion restriction is intended to be media neutral. This means that it catches the activities or actions of people rather than the media through which any such activity or action is conducted. This means that new methods of communicating financial promotions would still be caught by the regime. And to be a compliant financial promotion, the communication must be one which is clear, fair, and not misleading, and it must treat customers fairly. These requirements are found under Principle 6 and 7 of the FCA handbook. It's also worth noting that as well as the FCA, financial promotions will also be monitored by the Advertising Standards Agency. So firms need to be mindful of meeting the rules required by the FCA and also the advertising codes set by the ASA. Consumers can refer complaints to either of these regulators, and both regulators are proactive in monitoring communications for their compliance. So it's just worth bearing that in mind. So what is wrong with the current regime and why is the FCA proposing to reform it? Well, it's always a priority area for the FCA, who every quarter will publish data on the number of financial promotions reviewed during the period. The data includes figures on how many promotions were required to be amended or withdrawn completely during that relevant quarter. So the most recent data published shows that the FCA intervened to amend or withdraw 4,151 financial promotions between July and September, and that's the highest number since it started publishing the data. Perhaps unsurprisingly, retail lending, investments, and banking are the sectors with the highest rate of amends to or withdrawal of adverts, and amount to 95% of the FCA's interventions with authorised firms. And I've just put the links there on the slide, which gives the links to the data and also a recent article of how the FCA is ramping up its intervention on rogue financial promotions. And the FCA has also highlighted that it's seen several cases involving unauthorised firms and individuals seeking to take advantage of the rising cost of living So during the last quarter, the FCA issued 303 warnings about unauthorised firms and individuals, with over 20% of those warnings being related to clone scams. So another thing the FCA is looking to tackle. And the FCA has been conducting various consumer research and found a key message emerging is that too many consumers are investing in high-risk products which are not aligned with their risk tolerance and are unlikely to meet their needs. And the regulator is also concerned around how young investors are driven to invest, particularly in an age of digital innovation, where financial products can be more readily accessed by the click of a button without fully understanding the risks involved. An obvious example of this is buy now, pay later products, which we will be discussing shortly. And with the rise of challenger banks and new entrants to the financial services market, there's more choice of products and services than ever before. And products can be promoted and distributed in a variety of new ways via apps and social media platforms. So really, it's no surprise, and we have been anticipating a revamp of the financial promotions regime, particularly around high-risk investments. So that's really a condensed version of the existing regime. I've just sought to set the scene, but now we'll be looking forward to what's changing. What do your firms need to be aware of? What are the rules coming in now and in the near future? And for that, I'm going to pass you over to my colleague, Marianne. She's going to look and discuss the current and future developments around the financial promotions regime.
Thanks very much, Sylvia. So as Sylvia has briefly touched on, there are a number of proposed changes to the financial promotions regulatory regime in the UK, and these are now deemed necessary due to market changes over the years. So I'll go through what each of these are. I'm going to start with the proposed new gateway for financial promotion approvals. I'll move on to new rules for high-risk investments, touching then on crypto assets, buy now, pay later, and the all-encompassing consumer duty. So starting with this new Section 21 gateway for promotion approvals, this is one of the most prominent changes, which is going to alter the way which financial promotions, the financial promotions approval regime operates in the UK. So it's known as the Section 21 gateway. And as Sylvia discussed, under the current regime, by virtue of Section 21B of FSMA, where an unauthorised firm wishes to communicate a financial promotion, that promotion must be approved by an authorised firm unless the promotion is exempt. And this is set to change with this new gateway, which HM Treasury has confirmed in a consultation paper last summer. So what's the reason for the proposed change? Well, the FCA has found in recent years that the current approval regime does not fully safeguard consumers from potentially harmful financial promotions. For example, there have been cases where the approving firm has failed to undertake adequate due diligence to ensure promotions that it's approved meet FCA requirements, as well as instances of firms approving financial promotions which relate to products which are outside of their scope of expertise. So what will the new gateway involve? In practice, it will mean that authorised firms will no longer be able to simply approve financial promotions for unauthorised firms by default. Section 21 will be amended so that unauthorised firms are only able to communicate their financial promotions if these have been approved by an authorised firm, which has first obtained consent from the FCA to be able to provide such approvals. The proposal is that a universal requirement, known as the financial promotion requirement, will be imposed on all new and existing authorised persons, prohibiting them from approving the financial promotions of unauthorised persons. An existing authorised person wishing to undertake approval of financial promotions would then need to apply to the FCA to have this requirement varied or cancelled. And similarly, a firm applying for authorisation would be able to apply as part of its application to have the requirement not to approve financial promotions varied or cancelled. And it's worth noting that this new gateway won't apply in certain circumstances. So for example, it won't apply to firms approving the financial promotions of an unauthorised person within the same group, firms approving its own promotions, and principals approving financial promotions for their appointed representatives. The changes to the approval regime will allow the FCA to assess the suitability of a firm before it's permitted to approve financial promotions. And it will also mean that the FCA has a record of which authorised firms are approving financial promotions. So the legislative changes to implement this policy have been introduced in the upcoming Financial Services and Markets Bill. This is currently going through Parliament, and Sylvia and I will be discussing this in next week's webinar. And there's going to be a transitional period with 3 distinct phases for the gateway, which will hopefully allow for an orderly transition between the new and the old regime. So moving now on to high risk investments, there's also quite significant changes proposed to financial promotion rules for high risk investments, which were published in the FCA's policy statement in August this year. So why are changes being proposed? Well, consumer research indicates that too many consumers are investing in high-risk products which aren't aligned with their risk tolerance and which are unlikely to meet their needs. The FCA is concerned that in the case of high-risk investments, the requirement to ensure that financial promotions are fair, clear, and not misleading might not be adequate to protect customers and provide them with the information they need to make investment decisions. The changes to the FCA rules are outlined in its policy statement, and they fall into 3 categories. And these are the reclassification of high-risk investments, the consumer journey into high-risk investments, and strengthening the role of firms approving and communicating financial promotions. So I'll briefly discuss each of these categories. In terms of the classification of high-risk investments, this has come around in response to feedback that existing marketing restrictions are considered to be difficult to navigate and that it can be hard to understand what restrictions apply. And therefore, the FCA has decided to simplify its existing categorisation of marketing restrictions for high-risk investments by reclassifying them as either restricted mass market investments, RMMIs, or non-mass market investments, NMMIs. And these new classifications will allow the FCA to ensure that products with similar characteristics are treated in the same way under the financial promotion rules, as well as help consumers to match their risk tolerance with their chosen investments. So we'll turn now to the consumer journey into high-risk investments. This has come around as a result of FCA concern that consumers are able to access high-risk investments without understanding the risks involved. The policy statement introduces a suite of changes to tackle this, including strengthening risk warnings. So firms will be required to include prescribed wording for financial promotions for RMMIs and NMMIs, warning them warning the consumer that they're at risk of losing all of the money they invest. There's also plans to ban inducements to invest. So the FCA will ban promotions for high-risk investments from containing any monetary and non-monetary benefits that would incentivise investment activity. So for example, refer a friend, cashback, free gifts, or new joiner bonuses. There's plans to implement a minimum 24-hour cooling off period for first-time investors with a firm. So this would mean that firms must wait at least 24 hours before showing the new investor the financial promotion, as well as stronger appropriateness tests so that consumers only invest following a robust assessment of their knowledge and experience. And then in terms of strengthening the role of firms approving and communicating financial promotions, one of the plans or proposals is to implement ongoing monitoring of promotions. So firms approving promotions will be required to monitor the promotion throughout its lifetime in order to ensure that it remains compliant. And when will these changes come into play? Well, most of the new rules will take effect from the 1st of February next year. However, the new requirements in respect of risk warnings will apply from the 1st of December this year. So it's coming up shortly. And turning now to discuss crypto assets and the expansion of the promotion regime to include crypto assets. So 2022 has been the year of tighter crypto regulation, and it therefore might not come as a surprise that the government recently confirmed that the promotion of crypto assets will be brought within the scope of the financial promotion regime. So as it stands, only certain crypto assets, such as security tokens, are subject to the financial promotion rules, whereas other forms of crypto, such as utility tokens and exchange tokens, have to date fallen outside of the scope. So in January this year, the government confirmed that this is going to change in its response to an earlier consultation paper on crypto asset promotions. And the reason for the change is that HM Treasury believe that unregulated crypto assets expose consumers to unacceptable levels of risk. In particular, unclear, misleading advertising and a lack of suitable information were identified as a key consumer protection issue in crypto asset markets. The government's proposed intervention is intended to ensure that promotions are clear and frank about the risks involved in purchasing crypto assets. So how will the scope of crypto asset regulation be expanded? The government intends to introduce a definition of qualifying crypto assets to be brought within the scope of the financial promotion regime as a controlled investment. So HM Treasury intends to introduce secondary legislation to amend the financial promotion order, which Sylvia discussed, in order to include this definition of qualifying crypto assets. And by expanding the perimeter of the financial promotions regime as proposed, the government intends that crypto assets promotions will be held to the same high standards for fairness, clarity, and accuracy that's applied to the traditional financial services industry. So turning now to buy now, pay later promotions reform. So as you'll be aware, there's been growing concern in recent years that the unregulated buy now, pay later market is causing consumer harm. And there's been a movement to bring it and other forms of short-term interest-free credit products into the scope of regulation, including in relation to financial promotions. So research has found that buy now, pay later advertising plays into consumers' behavioural biases, making it more likely for consumers to make impulsive decisions which are not in their best interest. And HM Treasury published a consultation paper in October 2021, setting out proposals to bring buy now, pay later products into the scope of regulation. Currently, the exemptions in the financial promotion order mean that merchants who communicate for the purpose of introducing a customer to an unregulated buy now, pay later agreement, which is offered by a lender, which is authorised, does not need to seek approval of the promotion. The consultation paper therefore includes a proposal that all promotions of buy now, pay later agreements should fall within the financial promotion regime in order to strengthen consumer protections. And the FCA will consult on these proposals for changes in due course. And then turning onto the FCA consumer duty. So I'm sure it won't be news to you all that the FCA is introducing a new consumer duty, which will essentially require firms to focus on the outcomes that retail clients should be able to expect from their products and services through their full life cycle. So what does this mean for financial promotions? Well, the FCA has confirmed that authorised firms approving financial promotions on behalf of unauthorised third parties would be subject to the consumer duty. The consumer duty will take the form of a new consumer principle 12 for firms' retail market business. And this principle 12 will state that a firm must act to deliver good outcomes for retail customers. Principle 12 will replace and go further than existing Principle 6, which requires firms to treat customers fairly, and Principle 7, communications with clients. And this will mean that the definition of the financial promotions rules will be expanded to include Principle 12. So even if firms at present are meeting existing financial promotions requirements, they will still need to consider whether they meet all aspects of the proposed new duty, given that the rules will be broader, and firms should consider if further action is needed in order to meet the new obligations under the consumer duty. And then moving on now to the last slide in my part of the webinar. So it's very briefly, I just wanted to end on a kind of one to watch for the future. There's been increased scrutiny in recent years over the role in which online platforms, such as search engines and social media platforms, play in communicating financial promotions to consumers. So for example, in search results. And there's currently, as Sylvia mentioned, an exemption in Section 21 of FSMA for electronic communications in which a person merely passes on content generated by another person. The FCA flagged that this is an area of concern. As it stands, the FCA has limited powers to take down advertising by those who seek to scam people via the internet, and it must deal with each promotion on a case-by-case basis, often having to convince the platform that the promotion's illegal, and often the promotion will simply reappear once it's been taken down. So as a result of this, the FCA is considering with HM Treasury whether changes to legislation should be made to make online platform operators comply with Section 21 of FSMA, and therefore making them liable for the financial promotions which they pass on. So that brings us to the end of our webinar. It really was a whirlwind run through of the kind of vast suite of changes which are proposed to the financial promotions regime. However, hopefully it did kind of give a flavour of what's to come, and highlighted that financial promotions kind of really are in the regulatory spotlight at the moment. So thanks very much everyone for joining. We're finishing just a couple of minutes early, but we hope you enjoyed that, and we hope that we'll see you next week for the last session of our autumn series, where we'll be giving you a run through of the upcoming Financial Services and Markets Bill. So thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day.